Good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, July 1st. From the San Antonio Express News, my name is Luis Vasquez, and this is your Express Briefing. All of the stories you need to know to start your day. Today, you can expect partly sunny skies and a high of 97. Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolff said yesterday that area hospital capacity could run out in the next week or two if COVID-19 cases continue to rise. San Antonio reported its largest one-day increase in coronavirus cases since the start of the pandemic, 1,268 new infections on Tuesday alone. Hoping to slow down the transmission of the virus, Wolff and Mayor Ron Nirenberg tightened their emergency orders regarding masks. Our coverage of the spread of coronavirus continues today. Check out our updated timeline of COVID-19 in San Antonio, or our interactive maps and charts, which are regularly updated with the latest data from Texas and around the country. On a lighter note, check expressnews.com this afternoon for the latest feature from our taste team on icebox pies. We'll tell you what they are and how to make them. Next up are your top headlines for the day. As the number of daily COVID-19 infections explodes in San Antonio, inadequate resources and outdated methods of data management and communication at the Metropolitan Health District have hampered critical efforts to investigate new cases of the disease. On Tuesday, Assistant City Manager and Interim Metro Health Director Colleen Bridger, who took the agency's reign after Don Emmerich announced her resignation last week, acknowledged the problems and promised some fixes were on the way. For example, investigators have been slowed by a requirement that they use pen and paper to fill out forms while interviewing patients, a cumbersome process that precedes a separate data entry step. Brian Chasnoff has more on the problems and the plans to address them. Hundreds of people are flocking to city-run pop-up sites where testing is free and about 350 slots are available on most days. Determined people arrive before 4 a.m., 6 hours ahead of time to boost their chances of getting in, but some are still turned away. Dr. David Good, MedClinic's chief operating officer, said the 13 clinics here have been overwhelmed by the demand for its 15-minute rapid tests. Doctors and nurses have routinely stayed until 3 a.m. trying to test all patients who show up without an appointment and still can't manage to test everyone. Find out what local clinics are doing to manage the increased demand for testing, plus what you can expect when you go get tested. Laura Garcia, Joshua Fechter, and Melissa Fletcher-Stolchi have that story at expressnews.com. One way or another, the statue of 15th century explorer Christopher Columbus in downtown San Antonio is coming down. Crews are expected to transport it away from Columbus Park as early as today. All that's left to decide is whether the removal will be temporary or permanent. Joshua Fechter looks at the timeline for the city's decision and what would happen to the statue and the park if the full council approves the measure. Express News columnist Gilbert Garcia writes, "I've had misgivings about a Black Lives Matter protest organized last Friday outside the Northside home of District 10 Councilman Clayton Perry, even though I view the Black Lives Matter cause as righteous and essential." Garcia explains what the protest was about and what he thinks the appropriate venues for citizens to let council members know how they feel. Next up are your need-to-know headlines. You can find all of these headlines and more inside your Express News subscription. San Antonio reported its largest one-day increase in coronavirus cases since the start of the pandemic, 1,268 new infections. That represents a 60% increase from the previous one-day high of 795 new cases, which was set Saturday. Medical aid groups and volunteers have long been bracing for a coronavirus outbreak at the migrant encampment in Matamoros, where more than 2,000 asylum seekers await hearings on the U.S. side. On Monday, the first positive cases were identified. Bexar County Commissioner Tommy Calvert said more needs to be done to step up COVID-19 testing and contact tracing. He says, "We can blame the bars and restaurants and the young people all we want, but the government has failed on a number of points." A San Antonio home health care agency is suing the federal government for suspending its Medicare payments in the midst of a global pandemic. Along the border, federal judges regularly jail witnesses of smuggling crimes. The ACLU of Texas, in a lawsuit filed in Laredo, says those witnesses, often undocumented immigrants, are having their rights violated. The Bank of San Antonio and two affiliated banks, including Texas Hill Country Bank of Bandera and the Bank of Austin, have agreed to merge. The revenue index for Texas service sector registered a positive reading for the first time since February, according to a monthly survey by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Marriott International is planning to shutter two of its customer engagement center locations later this year, including one in the San Antonio area and another in Canada. Governor Greg Abbott on Tuesday delayed non-essential surgeries in 4 more counties as hospitals across the state struggle to keep up with surging COVID-19 cases. The Express News editorial board writes, "It's reasonable to assume that during a pandemic, a federal government would assure its citizens that healthcare would be more, not less, accessible. But rather than expanding health insurance, this administration has been focused on taking it away." The Texas Workforce Commission on Tuesday delayed its plans to reinstate work search requirements for receiving unemployment benefits because of the recent surge in COVID-19 cases. As coronavirus cases surge, local doctors are urging those who have recovered from the virus to donate their plasma through the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center. Shakespeare wrote King Lear while quarantined from the plague in 1606. Isaac Newton developed his laws of motion while isolating on the family farm during a later outbreak in 1665. Perhaps they aren't turning the worlds of science and art on their heads, but skills these 5 South Texans learned while staying close to home will be with them long after there's a COVID-19 vaccine. Richard Marini has a story about how 5 people are learning new skills and improving their lives during the pandemic. Next up, the fun stuff. Cameron County officials close county beach access areas on South Padre Island. The closures are to remain in place through 12 a.m. July 13th. A curfew has also been put in place from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. for children under the age of 17. An 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew is in place for adults. Read more about the affected beaches at expressnews.com. San Antonio writer Kaylin Byron's buzzy young adult novel, Cinderella is Dead, updates the classic fairy tale with a black gay protagonist. San Antonio's Classic Theater will head outdoors for its 2020-2021 season. Will Ferrell's Eurovision Song Contest streaming on Netflix is better than you think. The movie is part of our roundup of what's next in home entertainment this week. For the first time in more than 50 years, professional baseball will not be played in San Antonio this season. Minor League Baseball announced on Tuesday that it won't hold any games in 2020. And that's all for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. Again, my name is Luis Vasquez. Please consider becoming an Express News subscriber to get in-depth coverage on all the stories you heard today. Check the episode's description for links to the stories you heard about. Also, be sure to rate and review the podcast inside your Apple Podcast app, as it really helps the show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.